Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and all you lovely chaotic neutrals. I'm Ed with the Dragons and Diatribes Podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me for another episode of Homebrew Support. The party had been traveling for a number of days in the wilderness when they saw the smoke of a town rising in the distance above the trees. They began making their way towards the town, but while still a ways outside, they discovered a rather grisly scene. A body, half covered with dirt, exposed due to the melting snow. They examined the body and realized that the corpse was missing its face. The flesh had been pared off as one skins a potato. There was no discernible features otherwise, except for a tattoo on the body's forearm, a family crest of a falcon. The party buried the body and took the information to town to see if anyone had gone missing and see what they could uncover. They began by investigating the Golden Horn, one of the two pubs in the town, and met the son of the magistrate. A well-meaning and friendly fellow, albeit a little dull and a little too fond of drink. He recognized the tattoo belonged to Percy Peregrine, the lamplighter of the town, who often would help the magistrate's son home after a long night of drinking. The son, Uther de Vere, had only seen him briefly the past couple of days, but this confused the party as the body had been at least 5 days old when they discovered and buried it. But they believed Uther and went out on the street again to find the captain of the guard. That was when they realized that while they had been in the pub, the lamps of the town had been lit. This was the first hint of what my party was to be fighting. The creature was created for my gothic horror campaign, and I wanted to emulate as best I could classic doppelganger horror with a little bit of body horror mixed in, a la The Thing. In other words, I wanted my party to not be able to trust anyone around them, as anyone could have been replaced by the creature, which I dubbed the Face Collector, after a creature from the game Hearthstone, who didn't really have any lore behind him, at least not as much as a collector of faces should. This made the party suspicious and discerning of every person they met, especially after they heard that some of the people in this town, including the lamplighter, had immigrated to Angel's Glen, this town, a half-decade before from the east, after faceless bodies began to wash ashore and loved ones began behaving strangely. I wanted these creatures to help me create an environment where everyone is a potential enemy. This created some degree of paranoia in the party, especially after they discovered a tunnel that led up under the house of the lamplighter. So they stayed together with some guards of the town and set a trap, using the artificer's alarm spell to cover the bedroom into which the tunnel was dug. Through a sequence of events and leaving certain NPCs unattended with other NPCs, the party realized that one of the creatures had been right under their noses, and several pursued him. One, however, was left behind, one member of the party, only to discover that they had not been chasing one face collector, but two. Now, the face collector was frightening, and I wanted it to be frightening. And I needed a stat block to reflect this kind of creepy horror. The possibility of having your face ripped off and worn should be terrifying and should feel like it really could happen to your character. Nothing in any officially published module or book really suited my purpose here, so I had to break out my homebrewing tools and see what could be done. I think I did a darn good job, if I say so myself, so let's dive right in and I'll show you what I came up with. So normally I would begin with the stats, but this monster, based on how it operates and the kind of antagonist I wanted it to be, I'm going to have to explain it a little out of order. So I want to begin with some of its out-of-combat abilities, so you know a little more about how this creature can be used to its full effect, while still giving the party a fair shot at discovering these fiendish creatures and who they have taken the place of. And yes, they are fiendish, so a paladin would be of great use against them. First, when a face collector puts on a face, it can replicate the body of its host nearly perfectly. However, the body of the face collector is rather smooth, and they cannot replicate the roughness, the texture as well with certain people. For example, it would be really difficult for them, in fact impossible, to replicate the toughness, the callousness of a workman's hands. Or if somebody has a particular number of scars, they wouldn't be able to replicate that. What this means is that they have a difficult time targeting people that have very close friends, very close family. A husband knows the feel of his wife's hands very well, or vice versa, or a mother knows what her children's scars look like. She knows where they got those from. And if she realizes they don't have those, it would be very hard to keep up the illusion. So what that means is these creatures tend to target, at first, outsiders, people without immediate families, the elderly, people who would not be missed, with predictable schedules that can be easily replicated like a lamplighter. Also, the face collectors cannot replicate clothing. If they steal a face from someone and put it on, they would have to steal their clothes, which would probably be covered with blood for reasons that they'll see, or steal the faces when someone is alone. These face collectors were able to adopt the persona of Percy the Lamplighter to kill Percy's lover as well, who came to his door late at night. But my point here is that these monsters cannot disappear in an instant. They cannot immediately morph into someone else, hide a body, and wear their clothes, just like that. These creatures need to be smart opponents because there are a lot of ways they can be caught. They do not have a way to read their victims' thoughts. They only have what they can discern through close observation, undertaking in-depth reconnaissance, or finding a journal or something similar, which helps them emulate the person's daily routine. Second, these creatures are able to change their size. They can be either small, medium, or large creatures. This gives them the power to pose as anyone in the full range of normal heights, normal for D&D standards. And they can infiltrate dwarfs, hobbits, Goliaths, humans with great success. This ability to change their size will actually have a effect on their stats when we finally dive into it, as you will see. So with that great transition, we'll start talking about the stats. These things are devious, slippery, and powerful, and I intended them to be quite challenging, as they ended up being. They have a high strength with a +4 modifier, high dexterity with a +5 modifier, and decently high constitution with a +3 modifier. They are able to tumble with the strong members of the party while avoiding powerful spell effects with their slipperiness. Now, for their mental stats, the primary is charisma, because they are at a base actors, infiltrators. They have a +5 modifier. Next, they also have a high intelligence with a +4. So as to be able to keep all of their identities in check, you need to remember a lot of facts about someone if you are to perfectly emulate them. And their wisdom is also decently high with a +3 modifier. They have proficiency with charisma and intelligence saves, and a proficiency bonus of +4. From their fiendish background, they gain immunity to the charmed, frightened, and exhausted conditions. They also gain dark vision out to a distance of 120 feet. They also have immunity to necrotic damage, but vulnerability to radiant damage, which was used by our party's cleric to great effect. Their speed and armor class is determined by their size. When they are small, they're very fast and very hard to hit. They have a speed of 60 and an AC of 17. This allows them to escape quickly and quietly. When they are medium, they have a speed of 40 and an armor class of 15, a little bit less speedy, a little bit less difficult to hit. And when they are large, they have a speed of 20 and an armor class of 13. The benefits of being medium or large we will see when we get to their attacks, but suffice it to say, though they are weaker the smaller they are, but they are also quicker and harder to hit. The bigger they are, the harder they hit, but the harder it is to move around and the easier it is to hit them. I'm going to be totally honest, I do not recall what the exact max hit point value I assigned them was, because I keep all of my notes by hand, and requires a lot of erasing when I am tracking combats and such. So I don't remember exactly. It was somewhere around 100 for each of them, which I think is fair, especially considering the party was level 7, 8, and when you see the damage they can output, the low health is good, because if these guys had too many rounds in combat, it would be really pretty detrimental for the party. They have one passive ability besides the one that I kind of described with their ability to impersonate other people. They also have advantage on attempts to grapple, as well as holding on to a grapple or escaping a grapple. These guys are simultaneously slippery and sticky, depending how they want to be. So they can either kind of stick you to them or make themselves more lithe, more lank, and slip out of whatever party member might be holding them. Now, in terms of their size, they're actually able to shift their size in combat. They can spend their bonus action to change their size by 1 category every round in combat. So if they're small, they can become medium. If they're medium, they can become large. Or if they're large, they can become medium. If they're medium, they can become small. You can't jump over, so you can go straight from small to large or large to small, but they are able to change this in combat, which is can make the fight very different depending on when you catch them, who they're impersonating, and what they try to do. Now for their actions. Their base action is a multi-attack, using what I have dubbed paralyzing claws. The face collectors can attack twice. They have a +9 to hit, and the damage is dependent on the size that the face collector is when they make the attack. If they are small, they deal 1d4 plus 5 damage. If they are medium, they deal 3d4 plus 5 damage. And if they are large, they deal 5d4 plus 5 damage. Now, regardless of their size, they also deal 3d6 poison damage, and they proc a save against poison, a DC 14 save. If a character fails a save against this poison, they are poisoned, and while they are poisoned in this manner, they are paralyzed. Also, the face collector can replace one of their paralyzing claw attacks with an attempt at a grapple. So, what they often will do is they'll make their first claw attack, they'll proc the save from the player, and if the player fails and is paralyzed, they'll grapple them, and you'll see why. These creatures have one frightening finisher move, absolutely horrifying. I named it Throat Slit, and much like the vampire's bite, it can only be administered to a creature that the face collector is grappling. So they can't just make this attack every round. They have to set up and grapple the creature and then make this attack. The bonus to hit on this particular attack is determined by the size of the creature. The face collector, that is. If they are small, they only have a +4 to hit, and not to mention being small could keep them from grappling some bigger creatures. When they are medium, they have a +6, and when they are large, they have a +8 to hit with this attack. And when they make this attack, it is the only thing they can do with their action. They do not get 2 attempts at it. They don't get to try again. They get 1 shot at it. But keep in mind that oftentimes the target is paralyzed. That'll be important. But in terms of why this attack is so terrible, first off, the damage. It deals 8d12 slashing damage plus 5 slashing damage. So 8d12 plus 5. That is more damage than a fireball against a single target. It often will crit as well because you're targeting someone who's paralyzed. And what is really frightening about this move is it is one of the rare insta-kill moves in the game. If you are reduced to 0 hit points with this attack, your character is dead outright as their throat is slit, their face is peeled back over their head, and they are added to the face collector's collection, their menagerie of faces. Even if they are not reduced to 0, this action still procs a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 14. If this save is failed, the creature, the target's throat is slit, and they begin to choke on their own blood. So if they fail this save, they cannot breathe, and they cannot speak. They're still up, so if this happens to a fighter, they can still fight. You know, they'll probably have a couple of rounds before they go down from not being able to breathe, and not speaking doesn't do a lot, but a spellcaster, that's when they begin to have problems. But this effect is not permanent. It only lasts until some amount of hit points is restored magically to the player who is choking. I didn't actually get to use that because, as you'll see, I never got the opportunity to use the choking mechanic. The reason I didn't get to use this is because the party got split up. So it ended up, instead of 5 of them with an NPC fighting 2 of these creatures, it wound up being 3 fighting one of them and 2 fighting the other. They were level 7 or 8 at the time, but these things are still a dramatic challenge, and we actually had 2 players die in this session. Our blood hunter had his face torn off, as well as our fighter, which is something I don't think the party will ever forget. It was a moment of abject horror when the first uber strike hit, and he was reduced below 0, and the cleric said, "Oh, it's okay. It's all right. You're not reduced to your negative maximum. We're good." And I said, "Well, not quite." It felt terrifying to them, and I felt a little mean throwing it at them, but it's what they signed up for, and they ended up really enjoying that session, especially as luckily the cleric was able to revivify both of the down party members, not totally unaffected by having their faces ripped off, but alive. These creatures and creatures like them are excellent to throw at a party for a horror campaign, especially early on. The reason being is that it sets this tone of paranoia and grotesqueness that is really hard to overcome in a positive way. You want to set those expectations if you're running this type of horror game. The very existence of these characters in your world tells your players that nothing and nobody can be fully trusted until you've gotten to know them very well, and maybe even then, you never know. So, let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts, critiques, or similar creatures you've used, but I hope I've given you some insight into my design process and have inspired you to go out and create your own frightening monsters. So, until next time.